Birth rates are dropping across the world, but not for the reasons you might think. A new UN report says it's not that people don't want children, it's not that they can't, but they are choosing not to because many feel they can't afford it. So, what does this mean for the global population, and how concerned should we be? Hello and welcome to Roundtable. I'm Enda Brady. Now, financial struggles, health issues and fears over climate change are just some of the obstacles stopping people from having the families they dream of. So, what does this birth rate global crisis mean for our future societies?
Fewer children are being born in almost every region of the world. From Tokyo to Turin, many say they simply don't have the time, money or support to raise children. A new UN report says this isn't a crisis of desire, it's one of access and support. Over half of those surveyed said financial issues were the main reason for not having more children, from expensive housing to unaffordable childcare. 24% cited health concerns, and 19% pointed to fears about climate change, war and global instability.
I put off having children. I said, later, when I have my career, my house, a place to bring them. I started studying, finished my degree, got a stable job and bought a house. But then my rabbits came along. They filled the void that a child could have filled.
For many, the timeline kept shifting until it was too late or didn't feel worth it anymore.
There has to be a paradigm shift towards more democratic, gender-equal family structures by establishing society-wide childcare systems and family-friendly corporate management.
Even in Europe, countries such as Hungary, Italy and Germany have low fertility rates, and parental leave hasn't changed that. The UN warns that some states may misuse falling birth rates to justify nationalism or roll back women's rights. Japan recorded fewer than 700,000 births in 2024. Turkey's fertility rate has dropped from 7 to below 1.5 in the last 50 years. Demographers say the solution lies in policies that can support family life. So, as the gap between the families people want and the lives they can afford keeps growing, how long can societies wait before the cost of inaction becomes too high?
Well, let's meet our guests on this one. I'm delighted to say here with me in the studio we have Annette Kello. She's a journalist and broadcaster. In Nairobi, Kenya, we have Priscilla Idele. She is the chief of the Population and Development Branch. That's at the United Nations Population Fund. In Manchester, in England, we have Arkadiusz Wisniowski. He's Professor of Social Statistics and Demography. That's at the University of Manchester. And in Paris, Bassel Ouattara is an Associate Professor of Reproductive Medicine. He's also a consultant obstetrician and gynecologist. You're all very welcome to this roundtable. Priscilla, to you first. I see that the UN is predicting global population will start shrinking in the year 2084. But some experts are saying it will happen a lot quicker. How worried should we be?
Birth rates are falling below replacement level in most high-income countries, including, of course, Italy, South Korea, Sweden, and most of the European countries. While this is a sign of development, more education, greater gender equality, the pace and scale we are seeing now are raising red flags. The worry is about smaller workforce, higher health and pension costs, and major pressures on social systems. Even countries that have the best social systems like Sweden, France, are still seeing, record low birth rates. But it shouldn't be a question of worry. It should be a question of preparation. The just recently released UNFPA report titled The Real Fertility Crisis, The Pursuit of Reproductive Agency in a Changing World, addresses this global narrative about fertility rates and population trends. And the central theme of that report is that It's a lack of choice, not desire, that's contributing to falling global fertility. So people are not opting out. People are just unable to create the families they want due to economic, social, structural, and environmental barriers. So it's not a crisis of denied choice. It's a crisis of denied choice or a lack of reproductive agency. And UNFPA notes that around the world, people still want to have children, but they are shut out by financial pressures, lack of support, and gender equality. So we surveyed about 14,000 people in 14 countries, and whose population makes up more than a third of the global population. Most people say they want 2 or more children, yet one in 5 people say they will not be able to have the number of children they want.
Thanks, Priscilla. Let's bring in Arkadiusz. Give us your take on this, Arkadiusz. How much of a worry is this, do you think, that the global population in a few decades' time is definitely going to go backwards?
Well, this is an interesting question, and I fully agree with Priscilla that this is an important problem that countries face globally, especially the countries in the developed countries such as France, Italy, Sweden, Poland, or South Korea with very low fertility rates. I would say that demographic changes shouldn't be so surprising, because demography is a force that works over generations, over many years. So we have seen these declines since 1990s, demographic transitions and the decrease in fertility, decrease in childbearing, higher education, family planning policies. But we also have seen this shift from, let's call it, anti-natalist policies such as China, where we try to moderate the population growth, to much more pro-natalist, pro-family oriented policies. I would say that, yes, it is very worrying, and I think these countries have been thinking and working on that, implementing various policies, especially, for example, Sweden or France. But it doesn't seem to be bringing this fertility up to the so-called replacement level, where families usually have about 2 children per woman. I would say that there are also some opportunities here. We can think about sustainability of a planet, of cities. We can think about productivity. And we need to not only think about demographic changes, but think a bit more comprehensively about policies, but also about economies, and adjust economies to the aging societies. So think about pension schemes, how we organize them, how this is, how they work out in the long run, when we can prepare populations for aging, prepare the societies for aging.
Basil, how much of this is down to people deciding actively that they do not want children? They're making a lifestyle choice, that they're not prepared to compromise their lifestyle, and they would rather stay childless so they can keep enjoying the life that they have.
Certainly, I think I agree with the other speakers about the social and economic factors influencing this. But for me, as an IVF specialist working in the NHS in the UK, I see this on the shop floor, where a lot of patients are really finding it difficult to access fertility care if they're wanting to try for a baby and then unable to achieve it spontaneously. And similarly, it's beyond just access to fertility treatment. It's about all the social pressures that come with this on everyday life. So, as someone who is a proponent of women's health, we keep encouraging women to go into the professional domain and seeking career development. But then the flip side of this, there is not sufficient social and support for example, nursery care. It's very, very expensive in the UK. Education is becoming very expensive. So all this, I think, is adding a lot of economic pressure on couples to ration the size of their family and how they want to go about it for the long run.
Thanks, Basil. Annette, to you, talk to me about affordability, because a lot of young couples, they get married, buy a house, they have a lot of expenses, and having a child costs an awful lot of money.
Absolutely, it does. Currently, a nursery place is about £14,000 a year, which is a lot, should people want to have more than one. We are having children less than World War II, which is extraordinary because there's much more people. But I do think it's not just that, it's the housing, it's how fickle a lot of jobs are. They're not so steady as they were in yesteryear. And it's also people are leaving it later and later to hit those marks and achieve all the things they want to. But actually, as you know, it's a thing of the fertility is after you get past 35, it does start dropping. And actually, men's sperm has declined 50% since the year 2000. So there's also that aspect. So it's a whole conundrum. And we have to look at what our parents used to do, which was they didn't really think about it that much. It was, some things were just a given. There weren't that many holidays, maybe, and there weren't that many treats. And I think perhaps there is an element of sacrifice in all of this as well.
I was just about to say, they made sacrifices for us.
Yes, absolutely. And I think in this day and age, it's very much you see on social media that it's not so popular in the sense that there's the child-free influencers, there's the dinks, dual income, no kids, who promote, don't bother having kids. And also, I don't want to be negative, but 50% of marriages do end in divorce currently. So who's going to look after you when you're older? 1 in 7 people live over the age of 85, and the care at the moment in the UK is costing about 26 billion per year, which is going to get a bigger, for more people when they get older, if you don't have anyone to look after you. And you look at other countries where the culture is more families stay together, often even living with grandparents for longer. So we don't do that. Lots of us are very sporadic and spread out. So I think that's a huge problem.
Thanks, Annette. Priscilla, to you, talk to me about the impact of this then on countries like Italy, South Korea, Australia, France, Sweden. These are all prosperous countries, but in decades to come, their economies will be stagnating, I'm guessing.
It's a question of preparation. And I think countries should start anticipating and planning for demographic change. As my colleague said earlier, demographic shifts should not be a surprise. It's inevitable. But the planning and anticipating the changes that come with it is what is lagging behind. So from our research that we did at UNFPA, financial worry is the top reason people aren't having children. And over 50% of people cited cost of living pressures like housing, job insecurity as key reasons for having fewer children, irrespective of the context. From Sweden to Kenya to Malawi, it was the same, about 50%. But health challenges were also widespread. So nearly 1 in 4 people say health reasons, including infertility, prevent them from starting or having the families they want. I think the last speaker just mentioned about the age at first birth is now getting, higher and higher. And with that come also infertility issues. So studies in sub-Saharan Africa, for example, have shown that infertility is the leading reason for gynecological visits. Yet fewer than 2% of affected couples have access to effective treatment. So even those who want to have children, if they don't have medical access to addressing infertility issues, that will be a problem. And so that is a common thing. The third issue that came out clearly again across the board is gender inequality, which makes caregiving unsustainable, particularly for women. Women still do most of the unpaid care work. And again, it didn't matter whether you are in Europe or Africa or Asia. It was the same. Women still shoulder the burden in addition to being in employment or caring for the sick and young children. And of course, lastly, was pessimism about the future. Again, it was cutting across the board. Concerns about the current political situation and the future, and about climate change or environmental degradation were really mentioned by many people. About 14% for social situations and 8% for climate change.
Thanks, Priscilla. Arkadiusz, you're originally from Poland. I was quite shocked to read predictions that your country's population will go from 39 million, where it is today, to possibly as low as 19 million in a few decades' time. I mean, Poland is a huge country. Talk to me about the impact that will have on your home place.
Well, I would first stress that the population predictions of the population decline in Poland, these are United Nations forecasts. They come with quite large uncertainty. Most of, I think, the probability that it will decline is high. But I wouldn't say that it's necessarily always a bad thing. I mean, of course, this is concerning, and it may concern especially politicians. But if we look from a kind of global perspective, Poland is not just a lonely island in the world. There are many countries. It shares borders with many countries. And for example, recent events, the war in Ukraine and the massive displacement of Ukrainian population, who lots of them, about 1 million of them, found home in Poland. And the surveys and there's some evidence that some of them would not like to move back to Ukraine. They would like to stay and live in Poland. These situations and this kind of events may challenge those forecasts, or let's say they will actually fit into the uncertainty about the future of population. I will also stress that this decline in the population, we need to look also comprehensively in terms of, for example, how it affects population structure and whether, for example, the international migration, which I don't believe that would basically stop at the border and there would be no migrants coming to Poland. We can see what kind of population is coming to Poland, what are the population structures and how they can change and bring in added value to the future population and potentially resolve some of the problems. I wouldn't also say that migration is a solution. That's definitely not a solution, but it's we cannot look at Poland as a lonely island. It is a country that is connected with other countries in the European Union and globally.
Thanks, Arkadiusz. Basil, to you, do you think politicians now need to be realising what's coming down the decades? I mean, a lot of the leadership we see at the moment, populist leaders in Europe, it's all very short-termism, no strategy. Do you think a lot of world leaders need to start planning for having smaller populations and what that's going to do to their society and indeed their economy?
Indeed, and I think we're seeing some of that already. So we know that both the Japanese and the South Korean governments have been introducing new policies to encourage couples to have more children. Similarly, for example, the Turkish government is providing very high levels of IVF funding compared to many other counterparts in Europe. You go to the flip side where, like in the UK, we continue to have very, very limited access to fertility treatments, for example, that can help couples get access to fertility. In fact, 60% of IVF in the UK is done in the private sector. So there's a lot of catching up the governments needs to do in terms of future planning on the population. And we've been talking about migration, and I think it is one of the solutions, but as you rightly alluded, it is often coupled with a lot of populist sort of policies. So I think there is a need for local government to understand the importance and the impact of procreation and fertility on the longer term health and wealth of their particular nation, and how that could be driven in particular policies. And yet you find the other sort of side of the pendulum, like countries like Nigeria and Egypt, where there is very high levels of population that is prompting a lot of perhaps extra migration and distress in the country. So and strain on financial resources. So to date, unfortunately, most governments are not doing a very good job in introducing these policies that can help couples achieve the desired family size.
Thanks, Basil. That's a very good point, Annette, isn't it? Political leaders, if they want their populations to grow from their own people without migration, surely bring in more family-friendly policies.
Absolutely. The policies they're currently trying to bring out. I mean, I know we've seen the Start Again website, or it's changed names a few times, but it's about, you know, rearing children and things like that. These are very wishy-washy kind of schemes for people that already have a baby. I think we need to be looking at things like the childcare. If we look at France's model, they've got a really good model in the sense that people don't spend more than 3% of their wages on childcare. It's about €5 a day for childcare in France, which is amazing.
Price of a coffee.
Exactly. And yes, their taxes are very slightly higher, not as high as Sweden, but it's a good infrastructure and we have to start looking at that. I know there's been lots of things about politicians even talking about declining birth rates, but there's no point just talking about it. They have to put the structures into place. Obviously, there's housing too. A lot of people have such difficulty with housing and they feel like I've got to get onto the property ladder before I start getting going with other things. And then also people are feeling bad about jobs, and we have to look at women are now working just as much as men, which may not, in actual fact, some women are excelling and earning more than men now. And so for women, it's not only a physical thing with the finances, but it's also an emotional thing. They've built up this career. They then may have to take a step back if they don't have the right childcare or the childcare's too expensive. So it's a conundrum in that sense.
And tell me, you mentioned earlier on the rise of these child-free influencers. Do they really have an impact on, you know, people making decisions about their bodies, their lives, their futures?
Well, I think it's like anything. If you keep seeing it, for some reason I see it on my algorithm, but if you keep seeing something, it brings up conversation. And I've noticed a lot of people, particularly people in their 20s, are just like, well, what's the point? And then you're getting to your 30s and it's still not sure why they would be thinking that, but they think it's too much hassle, I think. And I think people now do like to do things like the holidays and doing other things, and the sacrifice just isn't there.
So this is actually a thing online, child-free
It's a movement.
influencers.
There's actually, they call themselves child-free influencers, and they're on TikTok and Instagram, and they just say, there's all sorts of reasons they give for it. A lot of it is almost like they don't like children and they think they're just going to wreck your life. But actually, if you look at it in the long term, you want somebody to care for you when you're older. Do you want random carers coming in? You know, it's all of that.
Thanks, Annette. Priscilla, to you, some countries in Africa will experience huge population explosions, though, won't they? I read predictions for Nigeria, for example, that countries like Nigeria will grow and grow. And then you have India and China, who between them account for about 14% of the global population. So some places will continue to grow and grow while others go backwards.
Yes, absolutely. Because in countries with high populations, there is already momentum that's built because the proportions of young people in those countries are quite high, ranging from 20% and in some instances 40%. And with that large population, we are not going to see a significant decline. But of course, all countries are experiencing, declines in population growth. But it doesn't mean there will be fewer people. There will be many more people as other countries age. Others will remain young for some time to come. But I think in our report, in the UNFPA fertility report, what we emphasize is that the solution to any population demographic shifts of any context lies in addressing the deeper structural barriers that make people choose between having children, many children, or fewer children, or no child. Because even in instances where population growth is high, it's the lack of choice, because they do not have access to reproductive health services, say like family planning, or even just the information and the knowledge of where to access it. So large populations in sub-Saharan Africa, including Nigeria, live in rural areas. And that means majority of them do not have adequate access and knowledge that will support them in getting the families that they can responsibly cater for. And therefore, unintended pregnancies are quite high. And that means those populations will continue to grow so long as those issues are not addressed.
Thanks, Priscilla. Last word to Basil. The work you do, working in IVF, you work as a gynecologist and obstetrician. Arkadiusz has used the word joy. Parenting and the arrival of children, it's still a joyful experience.
Miracle of birth, 100%. And, as someone who works with patients daily, it's always very rewarding to see small babies arriving. But I think we should use this technology to our advantage a little bit more. We should have more awareness and education of all the available treatments that can now empower couples and specifically women on how to protect their fertility. We're seeing a huge uptake of egg freezing, for example, where a lot of women are opting to freeze their eggs at the age of 30 to avoid a scenario where they could become childless in the future. And we're seeing more and more uptake even for, say, donor eggs and donor sperm for those who are unable to do it later on in life. So I think we have the solution, but we just need the education, awareness, and the governmental policies to aid the adoption, the safe adoption and implementation of these solutions.
Basil, thank you. And to Priscilla, Arkadiusz and Annette here in the studio with me as well. Remember, you can see more discussion and debate on our YouTube channel. Just search for Roundtable TRT World. But for now, from me, Enda Brady, and all the team here, goodbye and thank you for watching.